Hi guys, this is Peter Rodner from the Mokdong branch. This is my C2 Albatross vlog. I'll be providing you with some tips and suggestions that you can maybe implement in your C2 Project Day classes. So this being week one, a few things that I will be discussing is one, time management issues that we might be hitting. Two, the research project that students have to conduct in class. And lastly, obviously the final project and its three components. So for the C2 Albatross program, instructors and students will also be using the novel Made to Stick by Dan and Chip Heath. So obviously, since it's the first day of classes, students won't have done any of the reading, so it's going to be important that as instructors we guide them into some of the key ideas that they'll need for their final presentation. If you look at the CSLP, there's 3 pages of concept context. Now overall, this is really just hitting on 3 stories that are brought up in the actual book. The first is about the popcorn, the second one is about trick-or-treating, and lastly about tapping. So I'm really going to be going over these 3 stories and not worrying too much about answering every single question, especially if I'm limited on time, due to the fact that we may have gone over in our self-introductions. If I do feel that I do need to save a little bit more time, I probably would eliminate the actual tapping story, since I don't think it's as effective as the other 2. So every week, students will be asked to create some type of research presentation. This can be found in the perspective component in the CSLP. Now I really enjoy this component for several reasons. Number 1, it starts building teamwork between the students. Number 2, it gives me an opportunity to introduce any apps that I maybe want them to use for their final project. So normally when conducting the research presentation, I'm going to pair students up into 2s, and they're able to go on the media library and choose any article or video that they want to present on. However, because it's the first day, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually pair them up into the groups that they're going to do their final presentation. I'm going to actually choose what article I want them to do from the media library. This way, this will help move the component faster, and I don't have to worry too much about students working together or too many teams presenting. In addition to that, I also hope that this will give me an opportunity to see how the teams will work together, and maybe I can adjust or make some changes if necessary for their final presentation. In addition to that, for the research, I am going to have them create a Polaris Office PowerPoint. My hopes are maybe some of those components or ideas that they put into their PowerPoint, they can also use for their final presentation. So the C2 Albatross project this week has students create some type of urban legend which needs to be memorable, understandable, as well as change our behavior in some way. So in order to help them out, I'm going to go and branch out into also myths and superstitions. Now a few of them that are in Korean culture is 1, the idea of fan death. This is a story that if you go to sleep with your fan on, you'll actually die. Second, if you write your name in red, this is extremely bad luck and can also maybe lead to death. And then lastly, the idea that if you have the number 4, it's very unlucky. So for example, if you look on some elevators, they actually don't have the number 4, instead they have the letter F. I think this will help my students understand the concept and maybe start giving them some ideas for their final story. In addition to that, I'm actually going to ask my students to pick one of 3 categories to branch their or lead their story into. Number 1, the story could be extremely horrifying, kind of like a scary story or a scary myth. Second, it could provide some type of warning. And then lastly, it could be funny or extremely embarrassing. I think by providing them these 3 directions, they'll have a little bit more of a focus on what type of story they're going to create. As for the application, I'm going to have students actually use Polaris Office, and they're going to have to present both their story as well as explain why this might be memorable, understandable, and could also change our behavior, or what type of behavior they would like to have changed. I think this will be an easy way to start off our first week of lessons, and I don't want to go into too many applications right from the start. Obviously, I will have a few rules. Obviously, everybody must participate, everyone must present, as well as they must use the topical expressions provided in the CSLP. So I also think a fun way you can maybe integrate both your introduction and yourself into this final project is if you think about a good self-introduction where you want to be a little bit more funny or make up a few stories about yourself, you could actually have students use that a little bit later on in their final presentation. I think it would be really fun if they created an urban legend about you, a Cheongdam learning instructor, and how maybe you got started, or maybe you were a horrible teacher, or maybe you're a wonderful teacher. Obviously, if you already know your students and you have a pretty good rapport with them, this is something they might really enjoy. It also could be fun for them to create some type of urban legend to explain the start of Cheongdam learning, or maybe an infamous student that once went to Cheongdam learning. So I hope overall these tips and suggestions have helped you guys out, and I'll see you guys in my post vlog. Have a great class.